And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Crystal Cassidy, biochemist turned mystic after a near-death experience cracked open her perception and initiated a deeper exploration of consciousness. Crystal, thanks for joining us today and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Crystal, let's start on the day that you had your NDE and go from there.
In 2020, very early in March, I worked in biotech, and so we were working on a lot of different programs in the Bay Area to make sure we were responding as well as we could to the pandemic. And I was on the phone with one of the heads of a major medical institution in San Francisco, and I remember feeling like I was getting sick. And so I got sicker and sicker and sicker. And this was back when we really didn't know what we were dealing with at all. And I had a pretty good handle on understanding how the body could respond to something like the virus that we were seeing at the time. And I started having cytokine storms in my lungs. I could feel them. My lungs were getting hot and then cool and then stiff. And once that started happening, after a few days, I knew I was in some trouble because I knew that's really what ends up hurting people and you end up on a ventilator is because of that mechanism. And so we ended up going to the hospital. I was in quarantine, had to say bye to my husband, didn't know whether I was going to see him again. And that was certainly one of the most scary, unnerving experiences I've ever had. And really not having anybody to rely on. And my analytical mind, which was very strong, did not have anywhere to go. And so the doctors asked me, they said, you know what, we can give you a drug. We think it will help, but it also could make it worse. And you have to be helped in other ways. And they left it up to me. So I had that choice to make, whether I wanted to take the drug or not. And I did. And it helped to stabilize me to some degree. But the one thing I'll mention that maybe other people who have had NDEs also experience is I could feel death nearby. It was, I like to call it like a friend, an old friend that shows up at your door that you weren't expecting. And it's an oddly familiar feeling when I could feel death in my space. And before this had even happened, in my meditations, I was having premonitions of something coming and of past lives intertwining with this experience. So it felt very karmic to me. And as I got sicker, I had a moment that's very tricky to put words to, but I'll do my best. And I had been fighting for so long, I was exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally. And I remember just giving up in that moment and it was simultaneously not even giving up, but surrendering, like a deep level of surrender. And immediately when that happened, this surrendering, I was in between realms of some sort, not necessarily the light, but realms, and seemingly outside of time as well. I was going in and out of time. And I can explain more about what I mean by that in a moment. But this moment where I just kind of gave it over, I surrendered, and then something inside of me also reached out for help. It wasn't conscious. It was just kind of like all in one moment happening. And as soon as that happened, I felt myself asking, I felt myself reaching, and then there was another presence in my space. And I could feel it outside of my body. I could sense it outside of my body, but I could also feel my physical body in interaction with this presence. And this presence seemed to activate elements of my energetic system. So at first we could call the root chakra or the first center, and then the space between my eyes, and then my heart space. It was like bing, bing, bing. And I had this kind of moment of clarity that I was going to be okay. I wasn't going to fully cross to the other side, but I also sensed and could perceive the timeline where I did cross over, where this was an exit point of my life. So I was very aware of the two trajectories that were available. And I wanted to stay. I wanted to stay. And it took me about a year to really integrate that part of it, because I was confused as to whether I was scared of death. And I've been meditating for a long time, so I didn't think I had a fear of death. But I realized the reason I wanted to stay was because I wanted to serve my purpose in this lifetime. That was the driver. That is what brought me back into my body, into that time, back into this time. And from there was other experiences, one that I can talk about as far as the time travel part of it. But it was all very liminal and very non-linear as far as my recovery, which took over a year.
You said that a part of you reached out for help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it felt like it was behind my conscious mind, because it wasn't a thought that I had that, please, I need help. It was beyond that. It sat behind that. It felt like you could call it the higher self. It was another level of consciousness that was reaching out.
Do you feel like there was another presence with you, or an actual being?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it very much felt like intelligence, like love, like a powerful, powerful being. I don't know if I would call it God. It felt like, to me, maybe a guide. I have had a deep relationship with Paramahansa Yogananda. That was one of the first kind of identities that came forward for me, was some entity, some consciousness, some being that was like an ascended master, maybe.
At that point, that this being revealed to you what your purpose is?
It felt like so much love, so much understanding, so much of being witnessed, like truly seen beyond what I say, think, do, how I show up. It was like the ultimate. I still get chills talking about it. It was like the ultimate being seen for exactly who you are, which is this super powerful interdimensional being. And being seen like that by another being who is also powerful interdimensional being, I mean, it puts everything into perspective. And so in that moment, the clarity that came through was like helping, assisting, serving became very clear. And that wasn't necessarily going to look like what I had been doing up until that point, which was working in research and in oncology.
So would you say that your purpose is serving humanity?
Yeah, I very much view it as service. And the way I understand service completely changed, because when we realize and embody that, knowing that we truly are all connected, it's not just conceptual, it's foundational to this existence, then service, it's just like a natural evolution, because as you're serving, you're also serving yourself, you're serving the whole. And so it's not me versus other people, it's assisting the whole and becoming more aware of itself. And so for me, that's really when service took on a different meaning.
You said that it took you a year to integrate being back or wanting to be back, right?
Yeah.
For the rest of the experience, are you still integrating it or processing it?
Every now and then I get a little twinge of like, ooh. But I would say the majority of what I was integrating, my energy came so far out of my body. There was a lot of grief that I did not anticipate in coming back down fully into my body. which I know can sound a little odd, but there was parts of me that seemingly had accepted my departure. And so I had to work with these parts of myself, be like, no, we're back. We're in the body. We're on the planet. So in working through that grief of kind of expanding, being seen, and then bringing that all the way down so that I was bringing my body along for the journey, not leaving it behind. So that took quite a bit of mental, spiritual, physical healing and time.
Would you say the grief was a result from being angry that you came back, as if you were disappointed that you did come back?
That's an interesting question. I don't think it was anger as much as it was, I was very happy to be back. I was like, all right, let's do this. Like, let's go, with some elements of myself. I think there was grief in who it is that I had been. Because once you experience that, once you see behind the curtain to a degree, you can't unknow that. You can't unsee that. And so, who I had been in some ways and what I had chosen, even though I was very, very happy and very grateful for being so privileged in my life, that there was no going back to that. So there was grief of the past, and there was grief of, if I can put it as best I can, of being that seen and that expansive, and then coming back into what is a more limited perspective, unless you're consciously trying to open that aperture, which I dedicate a lot of my time to that through meditation, is being able to expand back out into that state as best I can and then bring it back. So there was grief on multiple levels for sure. But might be something interesting for your audience is also the time travel aspect. And when I was healing, I had just gotten back from the hospital, and I had finally made my way down to our bottom floor by myself, which was a huge accomplishment. And I went out into my fire escape and sat down on the chair, looked up at the sky. It was this otherworldly blue to me for some reason. And it was a very simple, profound moment that I thought about and went back to years after. I was like, that moment was so peaceful and so stable and so profound. And I never really knew why. I was like, I guess I just dropped into some deep presence. But I was in a meditation about a year ago, 3 hours into one, and my heart burst forward and I was taken, or astral traveled, to that fire escape in my past. And I was standing on the fire escape looking at myself sitting down. And I realized in that moment that I was feeling my future self on that fire escape. And there was a communication of some sort across space and time happening between past me and future me. And it was just one of the coolest things that I've experienced in this exploration of consciousness personally. And I walked around my old apartment for a bit and then came back. But it really was, it was powerful to know that part of my healing was maybe just me in the future reaching back into my past.
When you were sitting out there and you had that initial experience, did it kind of feel like deja vu?
That's a good question. It felt a bit like deja vu. It felt like a lot of peace, a lot of love. It just stood out, like everything was crisper than usual. So yeah, a little bit like that.
I don't think you said that you had a life review, but
No, didn't have a life review.
but it sounds like in some way yourself was revealed to you.
Yeah, very much so. I think my being seen by that being and in that space revealed to me, in the way that you put it is really great, revealed to me how powerful I was. And not in any way of shaming or judging, but maybe brought some light to how I wasn't seeing myself, where I wasn't acknowledging my worthiness, my wholeness, my power. So that became more clear as well, is the areas where maybe I wasn't showing up in the ways that I could. And it all happens in this, it seems like one moment, but it felt like so many moments, if that makes sense.
Do you think this experience was potentially a reset for you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I mean,
And
like,
I felt it coming before it happened. I knew something was coming for me.
could it have been possibly a reset that was negotiated pre-birth if you weren't staying on track?
I think so. I think it felt karmic, and this will sound a little out there maybe, but it also felt tied to a past lifetime, because before it happened, I was seeing this past lifetime in my meditations, and very clearly. He was a man, he was in medieval times, there was also a pandemic, there was a war as well. And he had left his family to fight in this war, survived, but was injured, came back, and his family had died from a pandemic. And so I got all this information. And when I was in this liminal space, I saw a lot of him. And I knew something along the lines of courage was being asked of both of us. And I believe past lifetimes are just all simultaneous. And so what I was doing in this lifetime was seemed to be affecting what was going on in his lifetime. And when all was said and done, the last time I saw this lifetime, I saw him from above with a new family. He'd gotten older and he had found his purpose in his life despite the vast loss that he had suffered. And I had also seen the alternative lifetime for him, which was shame and being a hermit and very, very bitter. And so that was really interesting in that there was something going on, like a balancing across my lifetimes.
After your experience, did you notice that you had any new abilities?
Mm, mm. Yes. I started to really embody the knowing. I was a bit of a hypochondriac before that had happened. I was very, very linearly minded, which has a lot of power, and I'm appreciative of it. But I started to be able to go deeper in meditation and connect to that realm, that expansive dimension, more and more easily. And I was also dedicating time to it because I was incredibly curious because of what I had experienced. And I started to, over the years especially, started to develop the capacity to, I would call it like, communicate beyond dimensions with other intelligences. That's been something that certainly has come online. Some people call it channeling. I I had practiced Reiki before this, but I became a lot more adept at moving energy and in accessing information that maybe I shouldn't be able to access. Um, but yeah, it's certainly my experiences in all things consciousness started to evolve quite a bit faster.
In looking at your bio, I noticed that you are also an ET contactee,
Mm.
and a significant number of my near-death experiencers start having contact afterwards. Do you think that's the source of yours?
I don't actually. I think it all started in 2011, 2012. And I had started to experience them in the dream state at first. Very vivid dreams that, like, are not just dreams, they're an experience. And they started to approach in a very careful way so that they didn't freak me out. And sometimes all at once, and we would take kind of big leaps, and then, their year would go by and I wouldn't have any contact experiences. But to your question, it accelerated massively after that experience. and has continued to accelerate. Even in the last year, I've had ships go over my parents' house when we were in Carolina Beach. They also saw them. So we've had very physical, visual experiences. But the most interesting for me is the experiences through consciousness, which is how they communicate.
What about during meditation?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Deeply, deeply a part of the experience. And my theory on that, and this is why I think people who've had NDEs tend to have this contact, is because it opens up something in your capacity to use your brain as a receiver, and you can start to really reach out in ways that maybe you didn't know you're capable of. And I also think that's why people who meditate and who've really spent the time, some level of expanded consciousness is necessary. And if you're doing that work, you're going to hear from them because they're reaching out. I think it's like a grassroots effort for people to have their own personal experiences. Don't take anybody's word for it. Like, have your own relationship with these very loving, highly intelligent beings. So it's a very exciting time for that, I think.
What kind of messages have they given you?
They also came to my family members. So my brother had a similar experience to me. And one of the first messages was that they were here, even around my soul family as a specific unit, that there was some sort of agreement that was made that when the time came, that there would be support when that's needed. So we definitely, multiple people in my family got that message. And they're not interested in us giving our power over to them. They are interested in lending out. I often see this visual, like a cosmic hand from above reaching down into our dimension. And they made it clear that when they were going through a similar point in their evolution, that other beings did that for them. So they're paying it forward. And we were talking about service earlier as a concept. They think about it the same way, that our evolution, our upliftment, our increased awareness is also theirs. So a lot of times people are like, well, what's their motivation for reaching out and having a relationship? And I'm like, it is the purest motivation, at least in my experience.
You mentioned earlier something about channeling.
Yes.
So are you an actual channeler, and do you channel the ETs or other beings?
This is very new. So it just came online in the last year. And it started in meditation. It was an activation. I was shown how to open the channel, how to operate it. I wrote it down in my journal. I was like, that is very interesting meditation. I will take note. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then maybe a few weeks after that, a being materialized in my living room right beside me here while I was sitting on the couch back behind me in between meetings in the middle of the day. And this being was bluish with some purple around the outlines. It was morphing in shape. And it was such an intense frequency that it forced me, in a way, into a meditative state. I had to go into this meditative state in order to be in presence with that energy. My cat was also there and locked in on this energy, and I could not get his attention. But he was also like winking at it. You know, cats do when they're in the presence of something that feels comfortable to them. So that also, for some reason, was very comforting, that I knew I was in the presence of something safe. And so that was about a 15, 20-minute experience of being in that energy, receiving direct communication, them making it very clear that they were not, for the lack of a better term, messing around. Like, they really meant it, that this was now an open channel. And of course, I had free will. But the only reason it was opening was because of the work in consciousness that had been done. And ever since then, I've been working on understanding that relationship, and just recently starting to channel more publicly.
So were you sitting there consciously awake, and then as it started morphing into your reality, it forced you into a meditative state?
Yeah, yeah. I was just taking a break on the couch, and then this being appeared, and it felt like a wave just washed through, and it was so intense, and it was also very loving and intelligent. And it knew exactly where my limits were, because as soon as I was reaching my limit, feeling like I was coming out of my body or having a hard time holding on to any kind of identity, it would start to adjust and back off in a way. But it was shifting. When I opened my eyes another time, it was had become not so much a humanoid shape, but like a three-dimensional white bright sphere that was hanging in the air. And that felt like, to me, it's more fully materialized in this dimension, but definitely not completely.
After your NDE, did your husband or any of your other family members comment to you that, like, wow, Crystal, you're a completely different person now?
Mm. I think so. I mean, I think, it was a confusing period too, because I was in between identities in some ways, from being in biotech in the Bay Area, and now that was no longer something that I was interested in, but very grateful for. And so I think there was a lot of confusion about the choices I was making, why I was spending my time on the things that I was spending my time on. And as far as like how I changed as a person, I do think more calm, less anxiety, less of an attachment to outcomes, like really starting to shift into following my joy, and being less like shaken by events in life. And I've always been pretty grounded. I grew up doing martial arts and Zen practices. So I've always had that kind of groundedness, but I just I didn't care as much what other people thought, if that makes sense.
Do you fear death?
I don't. I don't. I truly think that I don't. I think that there is work to be done with the physical vessel, because the physical vessel, our bodies, are designed to survive. And so I think that when that time comes, there will be some work to be done with the physical body and allowing it to let go of the fear and move forward in faith. But for me, I'm, especially after that experience, not afraid of it. I more look at it as like a great journey that I get to take at some point.
I saw in your bio you had a Kundalini experience. Was that after the NDE or before?
It was before. Yeah, that was probably 2015 that happened. And Kundalini, I know that word holds a lot of intensity for some people, but really think of it as that central channel activation. And so I was in a normal 20 something minute meditation, doing some breath work. And then I started to feel this activation in the pelvis. And I had learned at that point to, instead of reacting, to allow. And so, to the best of my ability, I was trying to allow the experience. And it started to move up my spine. And the best way I can describe it is, it feels like a river flowing upwards. There is simultaneously a coolness to it, but also an intensity to it. Also, there's this fire to it, which sounds contradictory, but I had that moment where I noticed the oneness in everything. And it lasted for about maybe an hour after the experience, and then to some degree for weeks after the experience. And that's one of those moments where you can't just unsee it or unknow it once you've experienced that connection. And over the years, unlike maybe other people, mine slowly moved. So I had some time, because every time it moved, my life would change. because your energy is shifting. And I really view the Kundalini now as this latent technology. And it is, I think of the activation as a dam being removed from your system. And the dam is there for a purpose. It is to protect your system until you're ready. But mine moves slowly over the years up my central channel. And so I really got to understand each energy center deeply. That's very much real. And as that happens, I think that was also a point in time where your abilities come online, in your capacities, in your relationship to energy and consciousness and dimensions really starts to shift.
You mentioned that you have contact with Yogananda, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does that work?
I studied his teachings for many years. Was very inspired by his journey. Autobiography of a Yogi, if you haven't read it, it's fantastic, life-changing book. And as I was going into his practices, his teachings, he would show up in my meditations and has always kind of been a guide for me. I also did ayahuasca once and I saw him in the room. And I can feel at certain times that he's around. And I still think during that near-death experience that was potentially him. But he seems to have a very grounded, a very teacher-oriented presence, very loving, and I can call upon him simply by setting that intention. Him and to some degree, Babaji.
So after your NDE, did you immediately transition out of the biotech industry, or was it a slow process?
I was in between some projects at the time, and life rearranged as well as I had been rearranged. And so I found myself with some spaciousness to start to question or think about what comes next. And so it was both and. I was still one foot in that world, put it that way. And so life kind of delivered me into some more spaciousness.
Well, you have an app called Soul Pod, and I think it's about helping people meditate, right?
It is. Soul Pod for me, when I was awakening, I wanted something that also balanced the depth of the experience. And there's a lot of amazing apps out there, and mindfulness is a powerful foundation. But I think this element of the mystical experience, the feminine perspective, and structure that can walk you into deeper and deeper and deeper contact. That's really what I was driven by in creating SoulPod. And so it's personalized instead of a big, massive catalog. It's very intentional. And it's designed to take you beyond the 5-minute meditations to something truly transcendental, as well as community space. You know, the meditation breath work is inherently a individual experience for sure. But I think we needed more spaces, and very passionate about this in the work that we do in real life as well, to have that moment after your meditation where you reflect, where you can ask questions. And we wanted to build something that helps support that as well.
So are you giving all the meditations on the app? Like, are you producing them, and are they all guided meditations?
They are. They're all guided meditations. We have 7 personalized journeys. So we'll find out where somebody's at on their spiritual journey and then put them on a very particular path through those journeys. And the meditations are both like philosophical contemplation, breath work, some mantra work, and then delivering you, especially towards the end of the journeys, into building that muscle of self-guidance. Because ultimately, being able to, beyond the guided practices, being able to guide yourself into those expansive states, that's also a very special, sacred ability. And so we like to walk you there. And then we also have other teachers. There's a lot of me in the app, of course, but we have other teachers as well in our portals. which are kind of like mini journeys.
You said there are 7 different journeys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you explain like what the journeys are about?
Yeah, I took a hard look at the main areas of spiritual development. This is around authenticity. This is around worthiness, sovereignty, power, expression, the mystical access, the inner mystic within, activating that, death, the unknown, having a healthy relationship with uncertainty. So, those are some of the concepts that we explore deeply in those journeys, depending on where it might be the most useful for where you're at right now.
Whether they're using your app or not, how does a person identify where they are on their spiritual journey?
It can be challenging, right? And so that's why we wanted to help with that. But I would say, in general, identifying where you're at in your spiritual journey. I mean, awareness is the first step. So having simply the tool, whether that's meditation, I think it's a very important one, or breath work that allows you some spaciousness to hear that inner voice, because ultimately you have all of this knowledge and information within you. It is accessible to you. So the only thing that we're doing, or any teacher is doing, or any structure is doing, is clearing out the debris, clearing the way so that you can hear more deeply. And so I would say, if you're just starting out, that first step of giving yourself space to develop your awareness, that stillness, and you will come up against resistance. You'll come up against the mind saying, this is a waste of time. I should be taking this meeting. The body's going to fight you. But if you tell yourself, I'm just going to stay today. And that's one of my mantras in my practice, is just stay. You've met your cushion. You're telling yourself your intention. You would be blown away at how simple that is and how much access you can have by just that. And then you'll start to hear exactly where it is that you might want to focus.
What is the end point of the spiritual journey, if there is one?
Good question. And I think you're answering it there. I don't think there is one. And so for me, I like to think about the spiritual journey as truly a journey. And that even when you reach this moment of enlightenment, which I think we've thought about it too much as a checkbox, as an ultimate destination. But I don't think it is. If you're in the human body on this planet, you're here to experience something that is in relation to the other, that there is separation. And so if you're here, that's your experience, no matter how advanced you are. And then after enlightenment, I think there's other realms. I think Buddha, Yogananda, all these really powerful beings, it didn't stop when they had that big realization. There's other levels. There's the causal level. And ultimately, I think there's a momentum back to oneness, where there is no perception of other, and there just simply is existence.
Do you play that gong behind you in your
I do.
meditations?
I do, yes. Gongs are really powerful it almost like unsticks stuff in your energetic body and helps that vibration. This is a C sharp, I believe. That vibration helps to dislodge and to allow for more flow and to quiet the analytical mind so that you can access the nonlinear. And gong's a very powerful, powerful tool for that.
Do you use crystal bowls or do you add binaural beats?
I love to play with a crystal ball, and I think binaural beats are really interesting. But I also think that there's something beautiful about the purity of stillness and silence, and becoming very familiar with that. So I think vibration, frequency are great dislodgers, great realigners, but ultimately that also lies within each person.
When I was looking into SoulPod, I saw something about it being especially beneficial for women. Is it made only for women?
No, intentionally for both, because I think even with our design, we wanted it to be very welcoming, because both the masculine and the feminine need access to these types of practices. So I very much, I feel strongly about it being accessible and welcoming to anybody.
If you had a friend that was grieving over the loss of a loved one, what type of advice would you give?
To give yourself grace in your process. I think grace is really important because it's not going to look like what you think it should or what you think it could look like, even. It's a journey, it's a part of the human experience. And it's also a reflection of how much you loved that person, that connection. And to also remember at some point when you're ready that the relationship has only shifted. It's not necessarily gone, but the relationship has changed. And so often we're grieving that change. But you can establish, if you want to, a new relationship with the being that is now in an unbounded state.
If you believe in reincarnation, why do we come here over and over again?
Yeah, good question. I've asked myself this many times. Why are we here? I mean, I think from what I know, reincarnation, I think a lot of times we think of it as tied to time, and it is across time. But I think of the soul as this three-dimensional sphere, and it's slightly differentiated from source. So there's all these levels of differentiation. And then the soul in the sphere is like focusing into certain areas of itself. And these focal points are the incarnations. And they're all happening at once and then being re-merged with the soul itself. And so I think that the purpose of those focal points, these incarnations, is to go a bit further and further differentiated, a bit further and further from the oneness or the source, and to see how far we can take it. And ultimately for experience itself, not good or bad, but just experience, just being in connection with the other and having this perspective, which we just don't have at some level of the oneness experience. And so that's the best way from my human perspective that I've come to understand it, which ultimately I don't think we're really going to understand until we're in other realms. But I do think it's for experience and growth and expansion.
After this life, do you think you're returning here or going somewhere else?
Good question. I don't know. I don't know if my higher self wants to come back. I have a funny feeling maybe somewhere else in the universe. I have a funny feeling that my purpose is, I don't know if it'll be in this lifetime or in another, but is to be an ambassador between species, emergent species. And I've seen glimpses of that. And so I'm very curious about that.
Well, what's the website of your app if people want to learn more about it?
Yeah, you can find us on the iOS App Store, SoulPod. You can find us at soulpodapp.com. You can find us on Instagram, and we're also now on Substack, where we sometimes host about 2 times a month workshops that go really deep into meditation, Kriya, and philosophical exploration.
If people want to reach out to you and ask you questions, can they do that on your website or Instagram?
Yeah, you can reach out there. You can reach out to Crystal at soulpodapp.com. And I'm happy to chat and answer any questions.
Do you have anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
Oh, yeah, we have if this comes out before April, we have a retreat in Joshua Tree. That'll be our annual in real life deep dive with a small group of people in Joshua Tree, which has been a really transformational place for me. And so we'll do Kriya meditation. We'll also do some contact experiences out in the desert, which are always very interesting for the group. And I'll walk us through that contact.
Cool.
Yeah.
Crystal, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
Yeah, that we are at a precipice of great change. I think everybody can feel that. And we have a lot more support than we think we do. And we are a lot more powerful than we think we are. And we're stepping into this time where, as a species, we're realizing our interdimensionality. We're realizing that we are truly interdimensional species. And when you access that technology within, it beats AI or anything else external. And so a focus there is going to serve you so well in the years to come.
Crystal, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Jeff. This has been really fun.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.